The first time I saw Karen Whitmore, she was standing on my freshly sodded lawn in a crisp linen blazer, her frosty gaze sweeping over my backyard like a general inspecting a battlefield. It was a sweltering Saturday in July, and I had just finished installing the one luxury I'd promised myself after a decade of overtime and sacrifice, a shimmering cobalt blue swimming pool. I wiped sweat from my brow as she rapped her knuckles, 3 precise taps, against my patio table. "Mr. Dawson," she said, her voice as smooth as the HOA's freshly pressure-washed sidewalks. "We need to discuss your violation." I blinked. "My what?" She produced a manila folder from her oversized tote, because of course Karen carried evidence in a folder, and slid a sheet of paper toward me. The Willow Creek HOA emblem glared at the top, followed by a list of offenses. "Unauthorized permanent structure," she recited. "Failure to submit plans for approval. And most critically," her manicured finger tapped the page, "non-compliance with shared recreational space bylaws." I squinted at the fine print. What does that even mean? Karen's lips, curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Section 12D. All residential pools must be made available to HOA members for community use between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., Saturdays and Sundays. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. "You're telling me I have to let strangers swim in my pool?" "Neighbors, Mr. Dawson," she corrected. "And yes, it's about fostering community harmony." I scoffed. Harmony? Karen's version of harmony was more like dictatorship. Willow Creek's HOA was infamous for its petty tyranny. $50 of fines for unapproved mailbox colors, threats over lawn ornaments, even a cease and desist letter sent to the Johnsons for their excessively loud bird feeder. But this was next-level absurdity. "I paid for this pool," I said, my voice tight. "I maintain it. There's no way I'm turning it into a public splash pad." Karen sighed, as if I were a misbehaving child. "Then you leave me no choice." She flipped to the next page. "A $500 fine, already filled out. Pay within 7 days, or we escalate to liens." A hot rush of anger shot through me. "You can't just read your contract, sir," she interrupted, snapping the folder shut. "You agreed to these rules when you bought the house." With that, she pivoted on her kitten heels and strode away, leaving me standing there, fists clenched, staring at the water that was supposed to be my escape. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the HOA documents I'd skimmed at closing. Buried in Section 12, between regulations about fence heights and holiday decoration timelines, was the clause, "All private pools deemed permanent structures are subject to shared access provisions." My stomach twisted. They'd gotten me. But as I watched Karen's silhouette disappear down the sidewalk, her head held high with the unshakable confidence of someone who'd won too many petty wars, a thought crystallized in my mind. This wasn't about pools. This was about power. And I wasn't about to surrender mine. The Willow Creek Community Center hummed with the low murmur of disgruntled homeowners, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and floral perfume. I took a seat near the back, my copy of the HOA bylaws heavy in my lap, dog-eared and highlighted. Within an inch of its life, Karen Whitmore presided over the meeting like a queen holding court, her platinum bob perfectly smoothed, her coral-painted lips curled into a practiced smile. When she called the session to order, her voice carried the crisp authority of someone who had never been told no in her life. "Now," she said, adjusting her wireless headset, "let's address the ongoing violations in our community." Her gaze flicked to me, A hush fell over the room. I didn't wait for an invitation. I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. Before we get sidetracked by violations, I said, holding up the bylaws, I'd like to discuss Section 12D, the so-called shared pool rule. Karen's smile tightened. That matter has already been resolved, Mr. Dawson. You were fined for non-compliance. Because the rule is unreasonable, I shot back. You're telling me I have to open my private property to strangers. Neighbors, she corrected, her tone saccharine. Without compensation, without supervision, and against my consent. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few heads nodded, mostly younger homeowners. People who had clashed with Karen before, over her draconian enforcement, but the older residents, the ones who treated HOA meetings like sacred rituals, clicked their tongues in disapproval. Karen folded her hands neatly on the table. The rules exist to maintain harmony, Mr. Dawson. If you didn't want to abide by them, perhaps you should have chosen a different neighborhood. The condescension in her voice made my jaw clench. This wasn't about harmony. It was about control. Her control. I flipped open the bylaws to a marked page. Actually, the original covenant from 1992 specifies that only community-owned amenities are subject to shared use. Private pools were explicitly excluded until your amendment last year. A beat of silence, then chaos. Homeowners erupted into chatter. Karen's smile faltered for the first time. Where did you get that? She demanded. Public records, said coolly. Funny how this change wasn't highlighted in the welcome packet for new residents. Her cheeks flushed. The board voted. You voted, interrupted a voice from the crowd. It was Marcus Rivera, a quiet guy from 2 streets over who'd been fined for an unapproved vegetable garden. The rest of us never got a say. Karen's composure cracked. This is not the forum for baseless accusations, but the damage was done. The room buzzed with skepticism. For the first time, people were questioning her, out loud. She recovered quickly, straightening her blazer. Regardless, the rule stands. Mr. Dawson's fine is valid, and if he continues to refuse compliance, further action will be taken. I didn't back down. What action? A lien? A lawsuit? Go ahead. I'd love to explain to a judge why you think you're entitled to my property. The room held its breath. Karen's eyes narrowed. Then with a sharp rap of her gavel, she declared the meeting adjourned and stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor. I exhaled, adrenaline still coursing through me. This wasn't over, not even close. But for the first time, Karen looked rattled. And that was a victory. The morning after the meeting, I woke to the sound of power tools. Outside my kitchen window, a crew in neon vests was erecting a sign at the edge of my property. Willow Creek Community Pool. Access here, with an arrow pointing straight at my backyard. Karen's doing, no doubt, a not-so-subtle declaration of war. I threw open the front door just as her silver Lexus rolled to a stop at the curb. She stepped out, sunglasses perched on her nose, a smug tilt to her chin. "Morning, Mr. Dawson," she called, as if we were old friends. The board voted last night to enforce immediate compliance. Your pool hours start today. My fingers curled into fists. Like hell they do, she sighed, as if dealing with a tantrum-throwing toddler. We can do this the easy way, or we can add contempt of HOA authority to your violations. I stared at her, this perfectly manicured tyrant who thought she could dictate how I used my own home, and something inside me snapped. "Give me until noon," I said through gritted teeth. Karen's lips twitched in victory. Smart choice. She sauntered back to her car, leaving me standing there, seething. The moment her taillights disappeared, I pulled out my phone and called the only contractor in town who answered on Sundays. By 11:45 a.m., a 6-foot wrought iron fence encircled my pool, its black bars gleaming under the midday sun. The gate bore a heavy industrial padlock and a freshly printed sign. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. I was adjusting the chain when Karen returned, flanked by 2 board members. Her steps faltered when she saw the barrier. This is unacceptable, she hissed. I crossed my arms. So is your power trip. One of the board members, a balding man named Greg, cleared his throat. Technically, the bylaws don't specify how pools must be accessible. Karen whirled on him. Don't be absurd. This is blatant defiance. I tossed her the key. It landed at her feet with a metallic clink. There's your access. Enjoy. Her face flushed crimson. You'll regret this. The threat hung in the air as she stormed off, Greg scrambling after her. The remaining board member, a silver-haired woman named Evelyn, lingered. You know, she said quietly. She pushed through that amendment after the Wentworths installed their hot tub. Never liked sharing that one. I raised an eyebrow. And the board just let her. Evelyn's smile was razor-thin. We're having a special meeting tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. She patted my arm. Bring your bylaws. As she walked away, I looked at my pool, now safely barricaded, and allowed myself the first real smile in weeks. Karen wanted a war. She was about to learn what happens when you corner a man with nothing left to lose. The Willow Creek clubhouse buzzed with an electricity I'd never felt at an HOA meeting before. Every chair was filled, with latecomers lining the walls. Word had spread. Tonight, Karen Whitmore's empire would either collapse or strike back harder than ever. I took my seat in the front row, my dog-eared bylaws and a manila envelope resting on my knees. Across the room, Karen sat stiff-backed at the board table, her usual crisp confidence fraying at the edges. She kept glancing at the envelope. Evelyn gavelled the meeting to order. Tonight's agenda is simple, she announced. A vote to repeal Amendment 12 to D, the so-called shared pool rule. Karen shot to her feet. This is outrageous. The board can't just. The homeowners can. Evelyn corrected. She turned to the crowd. Per our founding documents, any bylaw amendment can be overturned by 2/3 majority vote when petitioned by 20% of residents. She held up a sheet. We have 32%. A murmur rippled through the room. Karen's manicured fingers gripped the table edge. I stood, holding up my envelope. And I have proof this amendment was never properly ratified. Karen's breath hitched. Public records show only 4 board members voted that day. I continued. The bylaws require 5 for quorum. I slid the documents toward Evelyn, which makes this entire rule invalid. The room erupted. Karen's face went sheet white. That's a clerical error, she sputtered. Marcus Rivera stood. So was my unauthorized tomato plants, but you still fined me $200. Laughter broke. The tension. Karen looked around, realizing too late how many enemies she'd made. The vote was called. Hands rose. One by one, even her loyalists abandoned her, some sheepishly, others with visible relish. When Evelyn announced the results, 87% in favor of repeal, the room burst into applause. Karen stood frozen, her perfect facade crumbling. Then, in a voice trembling with barely contained rage, she whispered, "You'll regret this." But as she stormed out, her designer heels catching on the carpet, no one followed. Not even her usual sycophants. 2 weeks later, The for sale sign appeared outside Karen's perfectly manicured colonial. Rumor had it she'd moved to an even stricter community, one where she'd be just another rule follower, not the queen. As for me, I celebrated that Saturday by floating in my pool, the new privacy fence glinting in the sun, the only sounds being the splash of water and the sweet, sweet silence of victory. Because sometimes, the only way to win against a tyrant is to tear down their kingdom, one ridiculous rule at a time. Epilogue. The new HOA board repealed 7 more of Karen's pet amendments last month. And Marcus, he planted watermelons where his tomatoes used to be, just because he could.